My name is Amanda.
And I'm Kristin.
And we are the Exorcisters. So sit back, relax, and let's get creepy. Welcome to episode 31. In this episode, we are going to be discussing the 1974 slasher classic, the Texas Chain Saw Massacre. You know, this is one of those movies that is just so popular and historic for horror, but it's not really one that I've seen a ton. I think maybe this might be my 5th or 6th time ever seeing it. It's not really one that I reach for that often, but it's still one I appreciate.
Yeah.
It's just not one of my like all-time favorites, you know, and not because it's not good. I think all the screaming might have something to do with it. It's just kind of like...
Yeah, there's a lot.
Which
makes sense, but...
Yeah, I wouldn't say annoying. It's just like a lot to... You really have to be in that state of mind to watch it.
Yeah.
But I really like it. And, you know, when you think about it, this was made in 1974. So this was before... Jason, this was before Friday the 13th, this was before Nightmare on Elm Street, this was before Halloween even, and Halloween is credited with starting all the slashers, but this came before it in this genre of cat and mouse, and I'm going to kill you with a knife or a machete or whatever, and in this case a chainsaw. It really was the first of that kind. Other than, like, I guess you could say Psycho, but that's more of, I don't know, he's just like, was more like Crazy Town.
Yeah, exactly.
Like this is too, but like just in a different way.
Yeah.
I don't know, but
I agree. It feels different, but I also can't explain like why.
Yeah. I mean, he thinks he's his mother, it doesn't matter. We're not talking about Psycho right now.
Exactly.
We're not talking about Norman Bates. We're talking about Leatherface and the Texas Chain Saw Massacre. So this movie starts with a prologue basically saying this is the story of Sally's whatever, and it's a true story.
Yeah.
True story.
Which it's not, but it is based in part on the serial killer Ed Gein.
Right.
Like Leatherface is based.
I feel like there are a couple loosely based on him.
Yeah.
Because he's so interesting. But it also, after the prologue, you get this very distinct noise, and it's actually a camera going off. But the way that they edited the sound... Really, throughout the entire movie and the cinematography, the editing on this is just so incredibly unique to this movie. It's just got a different feel and a different atmosphere than most other slashers or even horror movies in general. And I'm not professional enough in the film industry to really put my finger on why it feels different. I just know it has something to do with the sound editing and the way it was shot. It's just a little different. Yeah. The saturation maybe of the picture, it's hard to explain, but it's very unique in that. And it's really unique in all respects, especially considering how early it was. But you also hear basically a news report that 2 bodies were found, and there are 12 empty crypts in this very rural, middle of nowhere graveyard, and there are no suspects in custody. And then it opens with the Texas Chain Saw Massacre credits, and then it cuts to friends in a van traveling. And there are, I think they're probably between, like, I'd say 19 and, like, 24 young adults, but not teenagers.
Yeah.
And one of them, his name is Franklin, and he's in a wheelchair. And one of the very first scenes you get with them is he just, like, falls out of his wheelchair and rolls down this hill.
Why? You see a truck drive by, but he's far away from it.
Get your boy. Like, do not let this... You're bad friends. Let him just fall out of his... They're bad friends throughout this whole thing him. But he's just falling out of his wheelchair. Yeah. Poor Franklin. But then he makes sure to whine about it the rest of the time.
Oh, he whines the whole movie. That he's alive.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And then back in the van, one of the girls, her name is Pam. She's talking about astrology. And one of the guys driving thinks she's crazy. And they pull up to this place... And Sally and Franklin are siblings. And their grandfather was buried in this cemetery that has been grave robbed, essentially. All these bodies have gone missing. And so they're there to make sure their grandfather is still there.
No, but there's all these people just hanging outside drinking. Like, not at work, not doing anything. What is this where they party? And they don't have a bar in town?
Yeah, I know there are like rural, like I know this is rural Texas, but I'm from Texas, and there aren't just people laying around in graveyards drinking.
Oh, that doesn't just happen.
No.
Okay, good.
Well, I mean, I wasn't alive in the 70s, but I'm pretty sure they had other stuff to do.
Let's hope.
At least drink at home. And then there's like this drunk guy saying he sees things, and it's just weird. And they get back in the car. I guess they got their answer that their grandfather was still there. And so they get back in the van and they're just driving and they smell something really terrible.
Yeah.
And then Franklin says they're passing an old slaughterhouse. And it's the smell of death, essentially. And it kind of cuts back and forth to shots of cattle waiting for slaughter, which is really tough to watch.
Yeah.
And then Franklin talks about how they beat the animals, and one of them says we shouldn't kill animals for food, and I'm like all on her side. I think that was Pam that said that. And while they're talking about this slaughterhouse, they see a hitchhiker, and they kind of debate on picking him up, but they do end up stopping and getting him. And I know the 70s was all about love and peace and all that stuff, but picking up hitchhikers is one of the worst things you can do. And my mother is so bad about it. Not as much anymore. She especially picks up, like, when she sees, like, older women walking in, like, the Texas summer heat, she'll pick them up and take them somewhere. And it's worked out for her for the most part, but there have been a couple times where, like, she took one to Sonic just to feed her and ended up losing her debit card and having to turn it off. And and then there was one she picked up on a country road, and she had been kicked out by her abusive boyfriend, so my mom paid for her to have a motel for a couple nights and fed her and stuff.
Oh my God. Your mom's an amazing person, but
my mom and I are like the same person, but I'm just not like, I've read too much true crime to do that. So kudos to my mom, I guess, but also I don't think she's done it since she got her debit card taken, but which is fair.
Yeah.
But they pick up this hitchhiker, and this is one of the best examples of why you shouldn't fucking do that. And the hitchhiker comes in and says he's headed south. You're in Texas, you're going south. He says his family works in the slaughterhouse, and Franklin and the hitchhiker talk about different ways to kill the animals, and I didn't go into detail because it bothers me, but the hitchhiker has photos of animals he has killed.
Yeah. Like,
just in this little, like, bag that he has with him. And he talks about scraping the flesh away from the bones, and then Pam, who is the one that says we shouldn't kill animals for food earlier, asks them to stop talking about it. And then Franklin has a small pocket knife, and the hitchhiker takes it from him and starts laughing and slits his own hand open.
Yeah, fucking crazy.
Because he's, like, looking real crazy and, like, laughing real crazy. Like, you almost think he's, like, mentally handicapped. He's just fucking crazy. And they're all horrified, of course, because he just, like, slit his own hand open. And then he's, like, bleeding and cackling. And then he gives the knife back to Franklin. And then he pulls another knife out of his sock, and he says, I have this knife. It's a good knife. And it looks like a razor. Like, that's a flat razor that a man would shave with. And then he whips out a camera, like the one before the opening credits, maybe. And he snaps a picture of Franklin and all of them, and he asks them to drop him off at home because it's real close. And then he says, you could come have dinner with us. And then he gives his photo to Franklin and tells him to pay him $2 for the photo, and they say no, and he gets all pissed off. And so then he basically sets the picture on fire with these little, like, I don't know what they are, like little explosive beads that he has. I'm sure some sort of, like, firecracker-y thing. And they're all freaking out because he's starting a fire in the fucking van.
Yeah. When people start freaking out and you're the driver, pull the fuck over.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, for sure. Or if something catches on fire, pull over. And as he sets the picture on fire, they all start, of course, freaking out. And then he just leans over and cuts Franklin across the arm with his knife. And then they throw him out of the van. And they're, like, driving away the slowest I've ever seen anybody drive away ever.
Right.
And he's kicking the van and smearing blood on the side of it. And then back in the car, Franklin is, of course, crying. And they talk about never picking up a hitchhiker again. Learn their lesson.
Exactly.
And then they stop at this gas station in the middle of nowhere, and the man says they're out of gas and it may not be there until the morning or the afternoon, later in the morning or the afternoon. So you can actually go to this gas station and visit it. And I want to say you can spend the night there, but cool. You can't go to the house as of right now, or they don't like you to go to the house as of right now.
So where is it?
So it is in a place called Kingsland, which is near Marble Falls in Texas, which for people that aren't familiar with Texas is like northwest of Austin.
Okay.
Like kind of west of Georgetown. But yeah, it's pretty much still, there's only like a population, I think, of like 6,000 there. But I would love to go. I think you can do tours now. They might have it to where they can do that, but I know they were working on it for a little while. But cool. It might be up and ready to go. So we should do it, just not in the summer, because fuck Texas in the summer. That's why I moved. Yeah. The whole reason.
That's why I moved.
Franklin asks if they know where the Franklin house is. And I was so confused. I was like, so is his name Franklin? I had to like look because I was like, his name's Franklin, right? That's like not his last name. And yeah, his name is Franklin. And he asks the guy at the gas station, do you know where all the old Franklin house is? And I'm like, all right, I guess his name is Franklin. So
I'm dying. I never put that together.
Yeah,
that's freaking great.
Yeah, I made a note of it, and I was like, am I getting his name wrong or something?
Unless they just call him by his last name, maybe.
Maybe, but when you look at the IMDb page, at least it says is Franklin, and I'm like, because Sally is also I don't know. So we're just gonna say his name is Franklin. Somebody's gonna come for us because they're gonna be like, his name is Franklin, whatever. But Franklin.
I love that.
He says the gas station owner says they don't want to go messing around up there, and Franklin says his father owns the property. And the man says he has good barbecue and they should just stick around and not go to that house. So I'm pretty sure most people have seen this movie. This guy is involved with this family.
Yeah.
First of all, the hitchhiker and Leatherface are his children.
Yeah.
And so he's even wants victims, and he's like, yeah, I don't need to go up there. Mm-hmm. Or he just wants them to be more opportunistic and stay with him. I don't really know which one it is. It's either he wants them to stay there because then he'll just be able to get them easier, or he truly is warning them, like, you shouldn't go up there because we're going to get you if you do.
Well, I mean, he is a little upset at the dinner of, we shouldn't be tormenting these people, basically. Let's just kill them and move on. So maybe there is a part of him that kind of wanted them to go, and if they do go, then thank God.
Yeah, maybe it's like, this is just something his family has always done that he's been roped into for his entire life, but he's like, this is fucked up. Mm-hmm. I don't know, but it's interesting to speculate about his intentions there. And then Franklin goes on this thing about the guy's blood is on his knife, and he's wondering if, like, he asks one of them, do you think you'd have it in you to just cut yourself like that? It must really take something to just run that knife. And he's going on about this for a while, and he's like, is that his blood here on my knife? It's just...
Franklin's crazy.
He's an interesting character, and his voice is so distinct. He's kind of like Zelda Rubinstein in Poltergeist. She's got that voice. He's kind of got the man equivalent to that in this movie. And they head out to the house, and Franklin asks if they think the guy was just trying to scare them by blowing up the picture. And they pull up to the house, and they all get out, and they all stare at the blood smeared on the side of the truck. And as they wander off, Franklin asks if they think the guy would follow them. And everyone else goes inside to explore the old, like, dilapidated house. And there's a shot of a nest of spiders. And this is where I'm talking about the cinematography is really interesting, because it really, zooms in on these spiders, and you hear them all, like, clamoring so around.
Gross. Yeah.
And it stays on them for a while. And then Sally is joking about how run down it is and talking about what it was like there when she was a kid. And then Franklin rolls in, again, struggling because there's not, like, access to this.
Yeah.
And they all go upstairs and leave him. And so he goes into the house, and he's mocking them for laughing and having fun because he can't go upstairs. And he says, come on, Franklin, it'll be fun, Franklin. So they convinced him to go on this trip. So he says, here. And then they just leave him. And he says, if I have any more fun today, I don't think I'm going to be able to take it. And he just starts, like, blowing raspberries up at whatever that he does upstairs. And it's so funny. That's, like, the only real, like, funny part in this movie. And then Pam and her boyfriend Kurt come down and ask Franklin where the old swimming hole is because they want to go swimming, and then they run off. And then you get a similar shot to the spider shot on this animal skull on the ground and these bones hanging in the doorway. And Franklin's getting freaked out, so he calls for Sally because this is, I think, his father's or grandfather's place, somewhere he grew up, and he hasn't been back in a while. Neither him nor Sally have, and now there's just, like, animal bones and all this creepy stuff hanging around. So he's, like, a little weirded out. And then Pam and Kirk, headed to the swimming hole, realize that it is dried up. And they hear a generator running and decide to walk to the neighbors to ask for some gasoline because clearly they couldn't get any at the gas station and they need more to get back. And they're just, like, slinking around the property, and they see all these old cars and find the generators running, and then they go up to the house. As Kirk is walking up to the house, he's, like, calling out for someone. And I don't know what it is about horror movies. Do you think you can just walk into somebody's house? just waltz right. Nobody answers the door, and you're just like, okay, I guess I'll just fucking go in.
What the fuck?
I don't know if that's a generational thing or just a horror movie thing. I don't know. I wasn't alive in the 70s. Was that just like...
Did that just happen in the 70s, people?
I mean, I know my grandmother, when I was young, she used to sit out front with us and watch us play, and she used to get real antsy about us, like, even getting closer to the sidewalk. And she said, and my mom said too, it was just a different time and it wasn't as bad, but I really think it was. I mean, abducted in plain sight just goes to show you that it was. And it just wasn't as talked about or as publicized on social media. So I don't know, maybe it's just a horror movie thing, but they're waltzing on into this house even though nobody's there. And so, of course, but before he even walks in, a tooth falls on the porch, and he gives it to Pam, and she's, of course, disgusted, and she storms off of the porch to a swing that's in the front yard. And so that's when Kirk opens the door and goes into the house, and like an idiot, just walks on in, and then, is anybody home? In the immediate shot in front of him down the hallway, you see a room with a lot of taxidermy and animal skulls hanging on the wall, and you hear what sounds like a pig grunting. And he walks more into the house to see Leatherface appear, and Leatherface beats him with a mallet and knocks him out. And he starts seizing, and he gets grabbed, and a door, like a metal door, gets slammed.
Which is great.
And Pam walks into the house after Kirk doesn't come back after she's called for him a couple times, and she's wandering around the front of the house calling for him, and stumbles into a front room that has chickens and cages and bones and feathers all over the floor, and skeletons that look like people skeletons, but only partials, like sitting in a chair, human hands and skulls hanging from the ceiling. And I made a note here that I just love the music. The suspenseful music in this is so good. And then, of course, Pam starts dry heaving and crying, and she gets up and can barely gain her footing. As she walks into the hallway, the door opens and Leatherface starts chasing her. And then we get that iconic scene of her making it out the door, but him grabbing her by the waist and her kicking and screaming.
This is why you don't wear flip-flops. Right here.
Yeah.
You can't run away from Leatherface.
And this is pretty brutal. He hangs her on a butcher's hook by her back. So just her skin just right on the hook. And then there's a zoom in scene of the chainsaw, and then he takes it to Kirk in front of her. And then it cuts back to Sally, Franklin, and Jerry waiting around for Pam and Kirk, and it's starting to get dark. It's about sunset-ish. And Franklin still worries that Hitchhiker is coming for him, and he just cannot stop talking about this Hitchhiker. He's so freaked out. I mean, he got cut by the stranger. Exactly. I don't blame him. And he can't find his knife, and he argues with Sally that she never gave it back to him. And then they're arguing. Sally's a bitch to him. Like, I know they're siblings, but come on, dude.
Yeah.
And then Jerry decides that he's going to go look for Pam and Kirk. And Sally wants to go, but Jerry says that she needs to stay behind with Franklin. And she's all pissed off about that. And Franklin says to her, "You really didn't want me to come, did you?" And Sally says she was just tired. And Franklin asks again if Sally thought the hitchhiker could follow them. And he says, "Sally?" And she says, "What now?" And he says, "Nothing, never mind." And it's so sad. He's like the kid that gets bullied this whole fucking time. And not even his sister's nice to him. Which I guess will be the last one to be nice to him if she's really annoyed. But... And then Jerry's walking around looking for Kirk. And then Jerry also stumbles upon the house and knocks on the door and says he's looking for a friend. And he initially starts to walk away from the porch. But then he sees Jerry's towel over the porch and decides to investigate further. And then Jerry is yelling for Kirk and says, "Quit playing games, quit goofing on me." And he hears some sort of almost like moaning sounds, and he goes in because he thinks that they're just messing with him. And he walks into the slaughter room, is what I called it, just like a butcher room. And he hears banging from a deep freezer. And he opens it and sees Pam in the freezer. And then Leatherface yells and beats him with a sledgehammer also. And Leatherface then starts yelling and getting real paranoid about other people being in the house or near the house. Because this is the third person that's just walked into his house.
Yeah.
Like he's not, I'm assuming these people are inbred.
Yeah.
Because they're not, it just seems like they've got some mental retardation of some sort going on.
But I mean, even at that, they're walking into his house. So yes.
Right, exactly.
We are supposed to feel bad for the kids, but also they're walking into his fucking house.
Yeah, that's why you don't fucking do that.
Exactly.
You're gonna get murdered. Because like in Texas, if somebody walks into your house, you probably shouldn't get them with like a chainsaw, but you can just shoot them.
Yeah.
Like, regardless if you're a serial killer or not, technically they're on your property. You can just shoot them.
Exactly.
And you won't get charged. Like, that's just the way it is. So don't go walking into people's fucking houses. But he is really freaked out. And he's got this mask on, and it's got, like, eyelashes, and it's real gross.
Yeah.
It's nasty. And then it cuts to the night. Like, it's very dark, and Sally starts honking the van and yelling for Jerry. Sally and Franklin start fighting because Sally wants to go look for their friends. And they eventually both go, which is so fucking stupid. Because Franklin's in a wheelchair. He knows that. They all know this. It just seems more efficient to leave him behind, because I can't imagine how difficult it is to push a wheelchair through like waist-high grass and uneven
but he's scared
ground.
to be left alone.
Exactly. And so they, of course, run into Leatherface, and he chainsaws the fuck out of Franklin.
Yes, he does.
Immediately. Because there were all these people in his house, so he's just assuming there are people around, so he's going to go looking for him. And so Sally screams and starts running away, and he chases her basically into his house. Mm-hmm. And she runs into the house and locks it, so he takes the chainsaw to the door. A chainsaw is one of those weapons that you can't really do much to, like, thwart it off.
Yeah.
Like, it can get through almost anything, especially because doors are typically wood. Mm-hmm. It's just gonna, until it runs out of gas, you're just gonna have to try to outrun it, which is essentially what she has to do. And then she runs upstairs screaming for help, and she sees what looks like dead people in an upstairs bedroom. Yeah. And he runs up the stairs after her, and she jumps out of a window and runs away again. There is so much of this movie that is just cat and mouse.
Oh,
like, a lot of screen time is just her running and screaming, which is, it makes up the basically genre that this is, but it's almost like a little bit too much. Yeah. A little bit too much running and screaming for me. And I think that's why I don't reach for it very often, because I'm like, she's just running and screaming, running and screaming, running and screaming. Okay, I get the point. Mm-hmm. Like, let's either get her or don't get her. Mm-hmm. And he's right on top of her pretty much the whole time. And she ends up at the gas station that they were at from earlier, which I'm wondering what the radius is of all of these things.
Right?
They must be
that too.
Pretty right on top of each other, because she doesn't seem to run that far, because she's pretty banged up already at this point just from going out the window.
Which I'm confused about, because especially in rural places where people haven't had to build on top of each other, those plots of land are usually
acres and acres and acres of land.
Your neighbor isn't like, you can't even see them from your house.
Right. So I wonder how, and what her sense of direction was. Did she know that's where she was going, or did she just stumble upon it? I know she grew up there, but it's just interesting, like, I wonder how much land she had to cover to get there. But I guess adrenaline will carry you pretty far.
That's true. But I mean, even when they're just looking for someplace to get gas, like, you can't see your neighbor from that house. So how did they know which direction to get to this house?
Right. Okay. Exactly.
But that's just horror movie stuff that you have to take on faith.
Yeah. And she busts into the gas station, and the owner sits her down as she's losing her shit, which is fair. She's trying to explain to him that somebody's after her and trying to kill her, but she's so, first of all, exhausted from running and hyperventilating that it's difficult to talk to him. And the business owner holds her and tells her there's no phone and they'll have to drive to Childress, which is interesting. So it's just a different, Childress, Texas is not really necessarily around where they were, so the setting of the actual house doesn't ring true to the movie. I don't think, throwing that out there. But he walks to get his truck, and she's just staring at the barbecue he's cooking and starts crying, because it probably is actual, like, you know, beef and pork and stuff, but she's just, I mean, it just is triggering because it looks like a butcher shop, and she's seen a butcher shop of people. So
exactly.
And so he pulls up with a truck and walks in smiling with a bag and rope. So it's like, okay, well, this is also an enemy. This poor girl. Enemies everywhere. He tells her to cooperate and there will be no trouble. And she grabs a knife, and somehow he whacks her with a broom. Not even that hard, and it's enough to drop the knife. And
yeah, I was thinking that too. He doesn't even, like, hit her that hard. She gives up pretty fast.
Yeah. Yep.
I feel like if you think someone's going to kill you or tie you up in that bag, you would fight a fuck ton harder.
Yep. But yep. She grabs a knife again, drops it, and then he's on top of her laughing and eventually subdues her and ties her up. And he puts her in the truck and turns off all the business lights. And he's like, oh, gotta turn that off. The cost of electricity is enough to drive a man out of business. And he's just like talking to her normally. So you also get the feel here. He's like, it's okay, sweetheart. Like, you're gonna be fine. Nobody's gonna hurt you. It's just a fucking lie.
Right.
And, you can tell he's a little uncomfortable with the situation. And he drives off and she's, of course, in the back crying. He says she's got nothing to worry about and gets happier as she screams louder, and he starts laughing over her. And he pulls into the driveway, and that hitchhiker from earlier is in the driveway. And of course he's like half-wit and he's all mad at him, and he gets out and starts beating the shit out of him and gets mad because he almost got caught. And he says, I told you to stay away from that graveyard. So you kind of thought earlier that creepy hitchhiker was the one at the grave sites, but now it's confirmed because what you think is his father is saying, like, I told you not to fucking go there.
Also, he said his house wasn't that far, and it was during the day, the hot summer day, and now it's nighttime.
Maybe he took a pit stop and killed somebody else. I don't know.
That's a good point.
They went back to the graveyard. So now we also know that this is just a whole fucked up family, because you're back at the house. So Leatherface, the hitchhiker, and the dude from the barbecue store and the gas station are all just one happy fucked up family.
No mom or sister.
No women. Mm-mm. Except I think there's a dead bitch upstairs in the room, but she is pretty sure dead. Yeah. Unlike the grandfather that's up there that you thought was dead.
Have you ever seen X-Files?
No.
Okay. There's an episode in X-Files where it's basically this inbred family, and they keep... It's really gross. They keep their mother underneath the bed, and then they just wheel her out to have sex with her to make babies. And that's...
gross.
I know. And that's what this makes me think of, Texas Chain Saw Massacre. Like, where are they creating Leatherface and this hitchhiker? Was it from the grandmother? Is that what she was there for?
That's kind of what I because you kind of get that feel there from this, like, podunk little town. Like, and I'm not saying that, like, rural Texas, but specifically this movie town, and they're all like talking about they've all just been doing the same thing for generations and generations. How are you going to bring somebody else into that?
Exactly.
It kind of seems like they need to be in the same family, and they're all kind of dim-witted. Yeah. So it kind of paints that like Hills Have Eyes-esque little picture for you there. Yep. So when they pull up to the house, the father figure, I suppose, yells at the hitchhiker again. I told you not to leave your brother alone. Look what your brother did to the door. And because he chainsawed through the door to get to the girl. And then Leatherface walks out and the dad starts beating on him and he cowers. And so even though you've got this big hulking man with a chainsaw, he's scared of his father or whoever this is to him. And he cowers back. And the other son, the hitchhiker's son, if you will, ties her up to a chair. And Sally realizes it's the hitchhiker, and he's taunting her, and she's screaming. And then he goes to get Grandpa.
Which is super gross.
Yeah. And then the father tells Sally to take it easy, and they'll fix supper in a few minutes. And then Leatherface comes in to observe her, and the dad yells at him to get back in the kitchen like he's a dog. Like, and he obeys. And the grandfather figure is wheeled down. And this is when we're pretty sure he was just dead sitting in a chair. But he's not. He's super fucked up looking. Yeah. He's almost looks like he's got some sort of, like, fake face on. But he's just decrepit. We wish he were a dead body. Because it looks like that. Exactly. And they cut her finger. This is so disgusting. They cut her finger and they put it in his mouth. And he just, like, sucks on her finger at the dinner table. What are they, vampires? They're just sick, like...
Yeah, they are.
And then it cuts to Sally's exhausted face, and she almost looks like she's passed out, and which essentially she did. And she wakes up to them eating, just casually eating dinner, and starts screaming, and they all start screaming and howling to mock her. And then she begs them to let me go, please don't kill me. And then she's like, or just kill me, like, I'm tired of this. And there's some back and forth with the family, and the dad says that he gets no joy out of killing. So this is when you get that first, like, he doesn't want to be involved. He brought her to the house, and that his job is over. He's not going to do anything beyond that. And then Sally says she'll do anything and starts screaming again, and they're all laughing. And when I was watching this next scene, I was like, oh, Kristin fucking hates this. Because it zooms in on her eyes a lot.
When she's going crazy?
Yeah, she's screaming. And it's zooming in on her eyes for a long time. And again, this is where the cinematography and the saturation of color in this film is so interesting to me. Because it's not just, like, straight... like what you would expect the colors to look like. There's almost like a yellow tint to this whole film.
Yeah.
Or at least these few scenes. It's really interesting. And I thought it was a really cool detailed shot of her eyes, because you even see the vessels and the blood vessels in her eyes and the movements that her eyes make. And it's pretty gross if you don't like looking at eyeballs. Yeah. And then Leatherface moves in on her, and the dad says, "No need to torture the poor girl. Get it over with." And the hitchhiker dude doesn't want to hurry, but the dad says there's no sense in waiting. So he wants to drag it out. He likes to do the torture and the scare. Yeah, exactly. And they tell their grandpa they're going to have him do it since he's the best at killing. And then there's more choppy zoomed in on her screaming face. The dad tells her she doesn't have anything to worry about because grandpa is the best at killing. And it won't hurt a bit. They get her up out of the chair and they lean her over this like metal bucket. Basically, it's a blood bucket. Yeah. And the grandfather, they keep handing him these like sledgehammers, and he keeps dropping them because he's like feeble, fragile. Like there's no way he can like lift that hammer and beat her really to death. And she hasn't stopped screaming this entire time. And they're all laughing, and he does get in a few swings. She gets a few knocks on the head that are pretty good. And during the scene, she's able, because they're all worried about him being able to kill her, so they're focused on, they keep putting the hammer back in his hand and picking it up and putting it in his hand. And she's able actually to escape. She jumps out a window. And it's daytime when she goes outside, and she's bloodied up and hurt really bad, and she hobbles away. And of course they run out of the house after her. But not only do you have Leatherface coming after her, you also have the younger kid, the hitchhiker, the skinny little guy. And then they both come out, and he comes out with his chainsaw to chase her. And she's really gimpy, so the hitchhiker gets to her with no problem. But they're close to a road, and they run out on the road, and he gets hit by a truck. And the truck stops, and she hobbles to the truck driver, but Leatherface is behind them, and the truck driver doesn't get going, so they both crawl up into the cab of this truck just to crawl out the other side.
Why? Yeah, he's not cutting through the door. He's just making marks. He's
trying to cut through the door, but he's not able to, so just fucking start it and go.
Stay in the fucking truck. But no, they get back out of the fucking truck.
They get out of the truck, right? And the driver grabs this really big heavy wrench and throws it at Leatherface, and he falls over, and the chainsaw goes into his leg when he falls over, and so of course he's screaming and in a lot of pain. And he gets back up, and they wave down a passing pickup truck, and she jumps in the back, and he is so close to her as this truck. These are like the slowest moving vehicles in any fucking movie. And she jumps in the back, and he's, like I said, so close to her, you're like, oh no, it's gonna get her. But then she's in the back of the truck, and it gets away, and she's like crying and screaming like a crazy person, and she's all bloody.
She's freaking gone. Yeah. Insane.
And he's swinging the chainsaw around above his head, and it cuts to the credits. So it really is, the whole movie is a really quick massacre. Yes. Like, very quick. Everyone dies, and then there's one girl left to play cat and mouse with, and she's the only one that gets out of this alive.
Yeah, she's our final girl.
Amongst the 5 of them. Mm-hmm. And I love the scene where she's laughing at the end. That would be me. I would just have lost my shit at that point. Because you've been in survival mode for so long, and now you don't have to be, so your body's releasing all of that. Oh my god.
I was talking to Connor when I was watching it, going, how long can you be that scared or that in fear of your life with people standing in front of you without passing out or literally going insane? Like, what else is your brain supposed to do?
Yeah, well, especially because it's like that fight or flight response, and if you literally cannot, like, do either one of those things, like, I would hope my brain would just be like, I got you, homie, and just shut down. Like, yeah, exactly. I don't want to be around for this. But I think that instinct I think it just stays until you're dead. Yeah. You know, I think the adrenaline doesn't stop. I don't know. Luckily, I've never been in that situation, but I can't imagine that the adrenaline or that fight or flight stops, you know? So absolutely. I think the whole time you're just riding this horrible, the worst kind of high, like, get me out of this situation, and then it breaks when you're safe, and then the crazy just, like, I would be laughing and crying, and I mean, I would say this a lot after horror movies. It all ends with, you know, usually like this, you don't really know how she is afterwards, like, and in, like, exorcism movies, they all just go back to normal. No, ma'am. You'd have to lock me up for a long time. At least a year or 2. for me to be able to cope with that and feel safe. Because at least in like a mental ward, somebody's checking on me every 15 minutes and nobody's going to get me because it's on lockdown. I would have to be locked up for a little while after any of this.
That makes me think of Final Destination. You've seen all of them, right?
Yeah, I'm not able to always distinguish all of them from one another because it's been so long, but yes, I have.
So the final girl in the first movie, you see her in the second one, and she is in a mental ward. She is in a padded cell. You cannot come in with all this stuff. And someone's like, really? She's that dangerous? And she goes, no, honey, she thinks you are. Because, that'd be me. You cannot have anything.
Me too. Like, no, I'm not going to hurt anybody, but I just think that I wouldn't be able to sleep. Like, my brain would never be able to shut it off. Like, especially, like we said, being in fight or flight for that long, for essentially 24 hours straight without a break. I don't think my brain would be able to recover from that, and I think I would just constantly live in fear that he's coming back to get me, and even if I got to sleep, I would just have nightmares about him.
Absolutely.
So I'd never get any rest. So what you got for... there's got to be a lot of history and facts on this movie because it's such a classic.
There are so many facts. So I'm going to admit right now, I honestly didn't particularly like Texas Chain Saw Massacre. When I delved into the facts about it, though, I'm like, okay, I'm seeing the masterpiece in it.
I wasn't super excited to watch this. I've seen it, like, and it's like one of those, like, you've seen it, okay,
it's a
whatever.
Classic, you have to see it.
Yeah, exactly. And I wasn't super excited, but I watched it and I got more into it this time than I have in the past. And I think it's just because I was picking up on things that I hadn't picked up on before. Like, I never knew why that movie felt differently to me. And I started picking up on the color saturation and the film, the editing and the sound mixing and all this stuff. And I think it was a pretty low budget movie. It was. So I love stories like that where they made it for not a lot of money and it just became so ingrained in our film culture, horror or not. Just became so ingrained in film culture and have to be held at such a high, pedestal because it is such a...
Those are the best ones that were made on such low budgets. I mean, think of Night of the Living Dead, Blair Witch, Texas Chain Saw Massacre. These are ones that we know forever. Yeah. And they were made on such low budgets. Yeah. And I feel like, unfortunately, we don't have as much of that now because movie companies have gotten so big. They have so much money to throw at
and you've got CGI now, whereas back, even up until... really the 90s, CGI wasn't that great even at that point. So everything you did, you had to really do with grit and creativity. Like The Evil Dead, for example. It wasn't like the best dummy work I've ever seen, but that wasn't awful. And and let's go back to the 30s. You've got Frankenstein with the dummy being thrown. Like they had to do all of those things themselves. Like it wasn't a computer doing it for you. So to be able to and the acting in Texas Chain Saw Massacre, Sally, holy shit, she did a great job.
Oh, I have more background stuff to give you that you're gonna think she's fucking amazing. And the fact that we don't know her as a major actress is really sad.
She did so fucking good. If I ever got an acting gig, I would just want to be the victim. I think just being just screaming and being it would be a tough part to act, but I think it would also be fun. Yeah. But I'm sure you have to put yourself through a lot to do this. Because somebody recently said to us that they don't really respect actors and actresses because they think their jobs are easy. I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't believe that at all. Yeah, I think that you have to really I think maybe some. Yeah. That can be true.
Even if what you're doing right in front of you is easy, maybe you are good at that, you still have, like I've said, all the parties to go to, all the premieres to go to, all of this bullshit.
If you're socially awkward but you're also a gifted actor, that sucks for you. Yep. Because that would be if we I'm not saying, but if anything ever came from this podcast, if we ever got any sort of notoriety and had to go to some sort of event or something live, I think that we would both need to be medicated. Seriously need to be,
we would freak out ahead of time.
Yeah, so I have a lot of respect for that. So just watching her in this role get so into really looking horrified, I think she just did a stellar job.
She did. All right, so my facts. So Tobe Hooper was the director for this, which this was his first thing, but we've already talked about Poltergeist, which he was in. Yes. Steven Spielberg. Tobe Hooper was the director, and he actually let Gunnar Hansen, he's the man who played Leatherface, he let him decide how he was going to play Leatherface.
That's cool.
That's very cool. So Gunnar Hansen, after sitting down for a while, decided that he figured Leatherface was probably mentally handicapped.
Okay, so yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
That's what he figured. He wanted to play it that way because he figured that's probably what was going to happen with this family. So he actually went to a school for mentally handicapped children, and he watched them for a couple days just to see how they move, how they act, how they talk if they can talk, things like that, how they do that.
Right.
He got very, very into it. And then he actually even went on, so we have 3 masks that Leatherface wears. Gunnar Hansen was the one who wanted all of those. And it's almost like, have you ever heard people talk about Lon Chaney and Phantom of the Opera?
Yeah.
How he acts through these masks. Mm-hmm. That's what Gunnar Hansen did, was he had his I'm gonna chop him up mask, which was the first one we see. Then the one where he's in the kitchen, it's actually like an old lady. Mm-hmm. So he's like being domestic and he's trying to help out around the house. That's that mask. And then he has the third one of they're having a nice dinner. So he wears the pretty lady mask, which has makeup and stuff on and things like that. These actors were fucking amazing. I can't even explain it.
Yeah, they really were. I looked into the man that played the hitchhiker. I don't remember his name in the movie because when I was watching it, and unless I hear it, I'm just referring to them as what I remember them as. And he did some anime voice acting and stuff, but he never really went on to do, because I was really impressed with his crazy, demeanor. And so he didn't really he did some more horror things, but he also did a lot of voice acting. So it's so interesting to me that you've got these really revered horror performances that really didn't go on to be big time screen actors. Linda Blair didn't really go on to be a big time screen actor. None of these people did. Robert Englund, he did a few things, but he mostly just stayed in Nightmare on Elm Street, little franchise there. And so it's just
more of that stigma on horror.
Yeah, because I think for horror, I'm not saying for other movies too, but more so than a love story or something like that, because most people have had some sort of relationship where they've been in love and they can channel their personal experiences. But when you're acting in horror, I would hope to God none of these actors have ever been captured, or possessed by a demon. You're really relying on the directors, the writing, and just having to go to a place you've never had to go before and reach into those depths of primal fear that most people never have to do. Mm-hmm. And so of course I'm a horror fan, but even that aside, horror acting, when it's done right and it's done well, is leagues beyond, I think, any sort of romantic comedy acting, and I hate to say that, or mainstream acting, because there's not a lot of personal experience you can use to rely on. And I also think that's why some horror movies are just so bad, because some actors just can't get there. Yeah.
No, these actors were amazing. So I was already talking about Gunnar Hansen, so I'll continue with that. They went on to do things that I don't think you could convince anybody to do nowadays. So at the very end, when he gets cut by the chainsaw, he's got a metal plate on his leg and a piece of meat and a blood bag. And he was okay. He was like, yeah, sure, bring this chainsaw at me. No, he was petrified. That's why that scream is real, because he's petrified, scared. But also because that he's screaming because that chain is hitting him through the metal. And it's causing it to heat up, and it burned the fuck out of his leg.
Oh, I bet.
The woman who plays Sally, cannot say enough good things about her. She's amazing. Tobe Hooper had a stunt double for her to jump out of the window, but she had to eventually land. And when she landed, it fucked up her knee in real life, really bad. So when she's limping at the end, that's real.
I'm saying, they go through a lot of shit, man.
And when he cut her finger with that razor, they couldn't get the knife and the blood to line up. She literally, she moved her finger so that it would cut her.
Wow.
So she was like, we got to do this for the movie. I'm literally going to cut myself right now.
Yeah.
I wouldn't.
Yeah. Well, maybe she was in such a place of adrenaline. She was like, I don't give a fuck. I'm not even going to feel it. It's like being drunk.
Yeah.
Oh, this is running so heavy right now in my brain. Just cut me.
So most of it, obviously most of this is Leatherface because it's Leatherface. Yeah. So Gunnar Hansen had one shirt the whole time that they were filming, and it was actually dyed at the time, so they couldn't re-wash it.
Yeah.
So he wore the same shirt the whole time in 100-degree Texas weather that
I bet he smelled so good.
People towards the end wouldn't stand next to him anymore, wouldn't eat lunch with him, wouldn't do anything.
Okay, but that really made the character what it is, because he looks nasty and grungy and mentally like just not there. So and it is also, they did film this, from what I understand, in summer in Texas.
Yes, they did.
Fucking miserable. With AC, it's miserable.
Yes.
You can't go outside. I guarantee you, I've been through enough Texas summers. Even so, when we had an in-ground pool that was like 12 feet deep, so the deeper it is, the cooler it stays. When it got to August, our swimming pool was usually like lukewarm, and it wasn't even refreshing.
Yeah, no. Gunnar Hansen at the very end, when Leatherface is spinning the chainsaw, that was actually because Tobe Hooper was the director, and he put the whole cast, through so much shit that all he was told was to be frustrated at the end. And Gunnar Hansen is like, stomping my feet's not going to be enough at this point. And Tobe Hooper didn't tell him what to do, so he swung that chainsaw to scare the fuck out of Tobe Hooper, which it did the trick because of what he had done to the cast.
I'm sure, like, it's okay, like, he could have dropped it, because it sounds like they had a real chain on that chainsaw, because you can rub a chainsaw without a chain, but it wouldn't have given them the effect they needed. It would have been really easy to spot, there's no chain on the chainsaw. So him swinging it around like that, man, OSHA would be all over that shit.
Exactly. See, actors would not have done this nowadays. And then the last important thing that I have is, it's a big thing. It's the dinner scene. So the whole dinner scene, it was filmed with real rotting food.
Ew.
In 110-degree weather, in a small, compact place.
And there ain't no AC in this old, broke-down house.
No. So, I mean, it's 100 degrees outside. You're a small, compact house with no airflow. It's getting even hotter inside.
Especially with all the body heat.
Yes. The body heat and the smell of rotted food and the smell of bodies, of just, like, sweat and stuff, became so intense. People were passing out. People were dry heaving. And the hitchhiker actor, he actually said that filming that scene was the worst time in his life, and he had been in Vietnam.
Oh my god.
Yeah. It got so bad in there that some of the actors started to slip their own sanity, like in real life, and they started becoming who they were. When you have cannibalistic murderers sitting at the table,
you don't want that.
You don't want them to slip their sanity, because Gunnar Hansen said that when his hitchhiker brother told him that he needed to kill her, he wanted to fucking kill her.
Wow.
Yes.
That's so scary.
That's fucking petrifying.
Yeah. Get them a window unit. Come on.
Dude,
just
right?
run it when you're not filming. They can still look real sweaty.
Yeah.
Man, that's dedication, though, to your craft. Because I think a lot of people would fucking quit.
Right?
I'd just be like, I am not going to finish this scene until you give me some fucking air conditioning. Whatever with the smell. Like, I get that that's for ambiance, atmosphere. Give me some goddamn AC. That's how I am, like, right. I don't have AC in my house right now, and when it hits the 80s, I think I'm going to die. Like, exactly. In Colorado. So
yeah.
In Texas, like, I know that we lost AC. The last summer that I was in Texas, our AC went out. And we literally got all the dogs, and my mom, my brother, me, and 2 dogs got a fucking hotel room.
Yeah.
We wouldn't even sleep there until they fixed it.
Yeah, I bet.
So, no.
I mean, I couldn't imagine. I'm just reading it. Couldn't imagine that kind of weather.
Other than being sick or injured, feeling like that hot is like the worst. A heat stroke is real too. So they need to be very careful with this.
Yeah.
And no thank you. I would have quit. I'm a diva, I guess. I would have quit. I would honestly, okay, so going into this, I was like, this is probably going to be like a 3 for me. I think I'm going to bump that to a 4 out of 5.
That's actually what I was thinking too. I was even like, oh, maybe a 2. I just don't like all that gore and screaming and stuff all the time. So, but now after having all this background knowledge on what they actually went through, yeah, I'm going to bump that to a 4 also.
Sweet. It's a good, and it's just not like something that I want to watch all the time. It's just like the horror movies that I want are really in-depth stories. That's why I watch the It remake so much.
Yeah.
That's what I like in horror, where it's scary, but it's also got a really strong story. And not that this one doesn't have it just doesn't have much of a story, because it's literally just cat and mouse the whole time.
Exactly.
But that's a lot of people's thing, and I'm not going to discount it for just not being my thing. So yeah, solid 4 on my end. Thank you so much for joining us for this dive through the Texas Chain Saw Massacre. we don't say this every episode, but just to throw it in here, we really appreciate you listening.
Oh, absolutely.
So much.
We were surprised that anybody was going to listen.
Yeah, and it still just blows our mind. We're like half a year in, a little bit more. And it's been really, really cool. But you can find us on Facebook and Instagram if you search for The Exorcisters Podcast. You can find us on Twitter at The Exorcisters. And we also have our website. If you're not into app streaming or anything like that, you can find all the podcast episodes on our website at exorcisters.com and also on YouTube. It's The Exorcisters Podcast. If you have any movie recommendations or just have an opinion you'd like to share and you're not into DMs on social media, you can find us at theexorcisters@gmail.com. Please feel free to email us with anything you have to say. We'd be more than happy to hear it.
And next time, we see the Dracula that was never meant to be. Till then, stay creepy.